Previously on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
You are the Slayer. Into each generation, a Slayer is born.
Why don't we start with, hi, I'm Buffy.
Xander.
Cordelia. Willow, right?
Mr. Charles. Angel.
Brutality.
I've been dying to get to this part. Let's start with the controls. In the original, we have tank controls for movement. Jane moves in an awkward circular motion. It's got that classic survival horror janky movement control system that I've gradually grown fond of, either because of Stockholm Syndrome or I don't know what. The remake sees a complete overhaul of the movement system for James. He now walks and runs with a full range of motion possible for a human being. You can't just turn on a dime while moving. You have to pivot, and you don't just break into a sprint when you hit the run button. There's also a weight to all of James' movements that makes the game incredibly satisfying to play. There's also a quick turn function like in other survival horror games, but just like every other survival horror game I've played, which is a lot, I've never found use for the mechanic. The combat in the original isn't really touched upon in a lot of retrospective and story videos that I see for the Silent Hill franchise, so it shouldn't be a surprise when you boot it up and it's not like a Resident Evil with many different ammo types and a plethora of weapon options. The combat can be boiled down to 3 basic steps: aim, shoot, or strike, and then run. James can certainly take care of the rest. Aim at an enemy with the auto-lock feature, strike or shoot, and reposition. The difficulty options only determine how hard you get hit and how hard the enemies get hit. We're still in the PS2 era of games after all, so don't expect fucking Sekiro. In the remake, shooting and smashing are all things we've seen before, but it brings something to the combat system no other Silent Hill title has done before: dodging. This mechanic is your lifeline. Dodge at the correct time and you're immune to any damage coming your way. There's a segment in the basement hotel where you're rendered unarmed and have to sneak around 2 heavy-hitting enemies. When it comes to stealth in this game, I say don't bother. Just get good at fighting and check your corners if nothing is around. Now, this is not a segment I was expecting to make, but given the leaps and bounds of gaming technology over the past 20 years, everything truly has changed. Enemies will hide from you, ambushing you when you get too close. Nurses will stare at televisions. The mannequins crawl along walls too fast for James's more sluggish movement. The enemy's behavior is so varied throughout the game, you always feel like you need to keep your guard up, which, for a horror game, is amazing. The original bosses really speak to the point that Silent Hill 2 is less of a game and more of an experience. The remake bosses are overhauled to the max. There are 7 bosses in total, and each except for one has multi-phase fights. When the phases change, not only do the environments, but the boss may learn a new move or become more aggressive. Everything changes as the fight escalates. My personal favorite remake boss was the Abstract Daddy due to its admittedly genius theming and overall very tense and uncertain fight. There's a crawl space that you can hide in early in the fight where he can't hurt you, and it has so much Angela lore significance we'll be saving it for the story chapter. He may not run fast, but he surely can run. Driving isn't wise with such heavy overcast, and James's car smells anyways, so put on your running shoes. It's time to go. The level design is scattered and all over the place, so if you're prone to get lost like me, don't forget your map. Second verse, same as the first, but better. James still has 2 legs, and he's going to use them to their fullest potential. The level design in the remake is just as satisfying as the gameplay itself, in my opinion. In the very beginning, you have to find a key to unlock a door. You wrap around the building the door is attached to, find an open window, and eventually a key inside. This, taking the long way to finish an area using the previously locked shortcut, is fully fleshed out to the point it becomes the slightest bit tedious throughout the game. However, the developers clearly took care in the fact that the game is linear, so there is linear progression. Where you'd have to backtrack to progress in the original, you unlock a previously locked door you found in the beginning of a level, at the end of the level, and boom, you proceeded into a new level. Confusing? Yes! Basically, the flow of the game progression is as smooth as silk. Most major objectives will be communicated through narrative beats like notes, writing on walls, and cutscenes, so definitely pay attention if you don't want to look up a guide or trial and error your way through the game. The activities you'll be doing in the remake won't be very different from the original. Personally, I never experienced a puzzle in a game where I thought to myself, wow, that was cool as fuck, let's do that again. Although, the caseboard system in Alan Wake 2 was pretty fun and rewarding, so it's not like I hate them or anything. Fortunately, the puzzles don't overstay their welcome, and what's cool is the solutions are different based on what difficulty setting you're on. Puzzles obviously aren't the reason why I play these games, but they're a welcome addition whenever they're present. For the most part. The puzzles this time feel more purposeful and realistic this time around. Instead of tying the hook to a piece of hair in the original, which would snap under the weight of the object in the drain, you would attach the hook to a surgical cable in order to effectively pull any sort of object out of a drain. Yes! I can't help but wonder what draws me back to this game. Silent Hill 2 is not the kind of game you put on after a hard day of work or if you're trying to relax. You know, play some video games. Now, I'm not about to sit here and speak into your ears and tell you that James is so me. No, it runs deeper than that. I empathize with him in the realization that Silent Hill for James isn't a town. It's a town for Harry and Cheryl, but not for James. Silent Hill's a state of mind. It's in your head. Hey, PS2 graphics, let's get it. There's a timeless liminal factor to the OG Silent Hill 2 that will keep it preserved for years to come. You can sort of count the polygons in the character models, sort of. The lighting is pretty damn impressive though, I gotta say. One of my biggest gripes about video games is the artificial lighting that's put in dark places so players can see everything at all times. Which, I mean, as much as I don't like it from an aesthetic standpoint, I understand it from a gameplay standpoint. It's terrible, and it takes attention and beauty out of darkness, but I know some of y'all are blind, so I get it. The pre-rendered cutscenes kinda, shocker that I'm even saying this, work. If you look at the game from the perspective of a dream or some sort of DMT-induced hallucination before death, which in the art director's canon ending makes sense. The plasticky look of characters coupled with their awkward interactions with one another combine with the equally awkward and uncomfortable cinematography that makes outdated visuals feel purposeful. Now in 2024, let's start with one of the only negatives that I have. The issue with the photorealism is that no matter how realistic it gets, there's still going to be a significant uncanny valley factor at all times. There's a shot of Angela and James during their final encounter where I couldn't help but realize that even though they were on the cutting edge of realism, it's still the edge. There are also plenty of points where their performance just tanked and some cutscenes didn't render in time, so there would be these weird, distracting visual hiccups. Gotta love the unstable nature of PC gaming, am I right, folks? Also, this is just a nitpick, but James's eyes are copies of each other, so he has one eye copied into two sockets. It would be an easy detail to ignore if the game didn't insist on so many close-up shots. Now, on to the good. Or should I say breathtaking. When I played the Layers of Fear remake, I knew that the Silent Hill 2 remake was in good hands with Bloober Team, at least in the visual department. They push Unreal Engine 5 to its limits and it shows. Despite the uncanny look of the characters, the game's textures look amazing. The clothing textures are usually what I like to keep my eyes on, and they are exceptional. I could go on, but this notes app won't let me fucking type. Imagine, if you will, if all the ingredients of this pizza we're about to make are different dimensions or universes. Call the idea whatever you want, the point still stands. The egg whites can be James, the seasoning is Maria, the yeast is Laura, the pizza sauce is Eddie, the baking powder is Angela, the cheese is Mary, and for good measure, the garlic is Ernest from Born a Wish. All of these characters are mixed into dough that makes up Silent Hill. All their experiences are different during the events of the game, just like how the experiences of the ingredients of a pizza while being cooked are different. Okay. Stay with me here. I'm actually going somewhere with this. When the pizza is put into the oven, the cheese melts as the bread rises, just as James fights monsters while Laura gets confused when James expresses concern for his safety in this dangerous town. Laura's confusion implies that there's no monsters from her point of view. Makes sense, right? If the monsters are a manifestation of James's guilt and trauma, why would a little girl with no experience in the world and no psychological violation see monsters? But since they're in the same place at the same time, there's clearly some sort of overlap which implies alternate dimensions overlapping. To further this point, there are multiple different endings that you can get that will totally recontextualize the overarching narrative of Silent Hill 2. The point here is that I believe that the remake is just another alternate dimension, completely exclusive from the original game. Each dimension is distinct and fundamentally different from each other, like pepperoni and cheese, or a good game or a bad one.
This town is full of monsters. How can you sit there and eat pizza?
For all you creepypasta fans, former or otherwise, unless it's just straight up license-free music, you've heard the Silent Hill soundtrack at least once. Actually, if you're a fan of any internet horror subgenre, you've most likely heard the music used in a video at some point, including my own. The ambient noises of this game still unsettle me to this day. Silent Hill 2 is a lonely, desolate town, comprised of denizens that either want to fuck you or kill you, or both. You'll be walking down a dark hallway and then suddenly there's some sort of noise, be it a moan or a thud, you don't really know what. All you know is that you're alone, but you're not safe. I'll speak more on the environments of Silent Hill 2 in a moment, but for now, all I'll say is my paranoia was justified with the creeping noises. Silent Hill 2's sound design holds a special place in my heart simply due to its near-perfect balance of noise and silence. Now I know what you're thinking, isn't that what sound design is? Yes, the game takes the sound design a step further by conditioning your brain to really listen. The remake does too, even better actually, but I'm getting ahead of myself. One of the first items you pick up, right before you receive your first weapon, is a radio. The radio is used to detect nearby enemies. When an enemy is close, the radio's static will pick up, and once the enemy is dead, it returns to silence. With that gameplay combined with the game's often awkward and intentionally unhelpful camera angles, sometimes the radio is all you have to detect an enemy before you see it or it sees you. The fact that the game basically forces you to listen to see if you're about to run into an enemy is a much more clever sound design choice. I'm gonna start sounding like a broken record here. Bloober pulled out all the friggin' stops. Everything sounds amazing. There's so much depth and detail to every noise. Nothing takes you out of an experience like a bad sound effect. Interestingly, I did notice that they reused some of the sound effects from the original game, but they updated them so you might recognize the original sound effect if you pay close enough attention. It's pretty fucking cool. Sound really is what makes the horror in a horror game. Where is the enemy coming from? Binaural audio tech is telling me that they're coming from the left, and the muffled effect in the sound tells me that the enemy is either around the corner, at the end of the hallway, or in another room. Sound brings depth to an image, and the remake does an excellent job at atmosphere and overall dread. There are some instances that something making noise on the other side of a door I was about to open, and then